All the characters in the story are over 18 years old. Early morning. A petite red-haired girl sat at a small table and slowly ate her breakfast, which consisted of fried eggs from an unknown bird, several pieces of bread made from hollow wheat, and a glass of water. Gwen chewed slowly and thought about today. Ethan had mentioned a pack of abyss hounds. She had already met them, or rather, she guessed that it was that huge red-haired monster. And today, she would have to face neither one nor two monstrous dogs. The girl had barely finished her water when, according to the alarm clock, a four-armed boss grabbed her by the torso right from the chair. The red giant didn't react at all. He was just doing his job and carried Gwen out of the room with ease, as if she weighed nothing. The long corridors gave way to turns that led back to the corridors. The redhead was clearly not being carried to the bar stage. Soon, a bright light hit Gwen's eyes, and they emerged onto the surface of the sandy planet, or rather onto the landing pad where Ethan was already standing. What's going on? The girl raised her head, being in the embrace of one of the arms of Rads, and turned to Ethan. Well, didn't you really think we'd let a pack of animals mess up our den and house? Welk rented you for his dogs, so Rads will escort you to a planet near Besna, where Green Gring keeps his pets. But I don't want to. Do you forgot? You're just Mono's property. Gwen drooped, another frightening unknown ahead. Rads went into the ship with her and shoved her into a kind of cage, closed the door and sat at the helm. Despite the girl's objections that she was not comfortable on the floor of the cage, the big red man did not seem to hear her and continued to guide the spaceship to its destination. All that remained for the redhead was to look out the porthole, in which, as if in a movie, distant stars flashed by and planets were so close, which Gwen could now see better than through any telescope from Earth. We have arrived, said how Rad snapped, smoothly landing vertically on the customer's planet. Four Fingers opened the cage and took the girl as a toy, pressed the button for opening the outer door with his thumb, and they went outside. The first thing Gwen saw on the new planet was a gray Earth, in some places even resembling ashes from a campfire. She raised her head and saw the starry sky and some fragments near the planet with a large stone in the center. Once this multitude of bodies was probably a celestial body. This is the Abyss, female, one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy. Despite the power of his body, Rad shuddered, remembering something unpleasant. The multimeter building seemed to have grown out of the ground. So unexpectedly it seemed to Gwen. The massive Hermes rode skyward. The girl and her bodyguard went inside. I'm glad you've arrived. I'm glad to see the female with you. Have you set up a hero beast? What for? All sorts of scum are hanging around, just in case, and you never know what might come from the abyss. I understand. The goods have been delivered. Can I fly? Well, wait. Take her to the aviary. I've become too old. My telekinesis has become the wrong one. Okay. What do you say, Welk? Speaking of payment, did you say there would be parts for each day? Gwen's face turned red. She suspected that the deal could be multi-day in nature, but while she was flying, she hoped that after an earthly day she would be in her room on a soft platform. Her strength seemed to have left her. Welk and Rads walked down one wide corridor and out onto the bridge above the aviary. Although such a modest word could not be used to describe the place where the redhead would be a guest. A metal bridge towered over a huge terrarium with its ecosystem, trees similar to terrestrial ones, vines, low grass, tropical twilight. All this was a component of this aviary. The borders were inaccessible to Gwen's eye. Perhaps half the planet and maybe the whole is an aviary of the hounds of the abyss. Rads threw the girl onto the floor of the glass elevator, the door of which immediately slammed shut. No, let me out, Gwen screamed, realizing that she would have to try on a new role in Welk's enclosure. Miniature fists beat on the walls, uselessly. Slowly the girl sank down. The green dwarf and the red giant walked away. The metal bridge followed them and then also disappeared somewhere in the distance. The elevator hovered about 30 centimeters from the ground and the bottom disappeared. Gwen carefully walked deep into the alien tropics, trying not to make the slightest noise. It was damn creepy. The forest made absolutely no animal sounds. No birds, no crickets, although there was still a crunch of branches in the distance. She came to a small river that tasted like perfectly ordinary water. Suddenly, The crunching of branches began to intensify. Something was rapidly approaching the girl, and soon the growl was added to the attention-grabbing sounds. The hound jumped ashore from the opposite side of the river. The dog didn't look like the one the girl had met at the bar. He was smaller. His fangs weren't as prominent. He was smaller, but still 2.5 times bigger than Gwen. There was a diagonal scar across his eyeless skull on his muzzle, and most importantly, the color. He was blue and only sparse red hairs decorated his skin. The monster jumped across the river in one leap and ended up next to the redhead. "Hush, boy, it's okay." Gwen wanted to reassure the hound. The monster grinned, baring its fangs, recognizing the girl as an outsider. The redhead was retreating into the forest with her back, when suddenly she ran into a tree. She pressed her whole body into the trunk. The dog was getting closer. The fear in Gwen's head was overwhelming. The hound tensed, raising its head to the sky, as if exposing its nostrils, hidden behind the fur, in the direction of the smell. "Yes, it's better this way. I'm not food and I'm not an enemy. You shouldn't eat me." The girl, who was still shaking with fear, relaxed a little. The dog leaned on the tree with his front paw, showing his height on his hind legs. Although the female was in his power, it did not hurt to show off. "The real one. The male. I smelled a female." Gwen continued talking to the animal. She couldn't resist, and they made love. When Gwen woke up, she saw overturned trees and the ground with grass. The girl was still in the castle with the hound, and it was running somewhere unhurriedly. Half an hour later, the hound ran out into a large clearing by the river and eagerly lapped up the water, and when it quenched its thirst, it retreated to the center of the meadow. "Phew, what a run! I was thirsty myself." Gwen was very tired from such a small trip. Her arms and legs were numb from exertion. The dog walked away, as if feeling unwell, and before disappearing into the forest, he raised his head and howled loudly. A moment later, 3 of his brothers ran into the clearing and instantly found themselves near the female lying on the grass. "I'm not prey. I'm a female." For almost 2 hours, Gwen stood in the castle with the hound. The girl even regained some strength. Many hours later, the dogs left Gwen completely alone in the clearing, just like last time. Then the girl put a dried t-shirt on herself and curled up, falling asleep sweetly. A sharp bark made Gwen wake up. The dog's muzzle was right in front of the girl's face. She jumped back in surprise and saw that there were 8 hounds next to her. It took many days, or even several weeks, before Gwen was left alone. The redhead slept well and stretched, ate and sat on a fallen tree waiting for the hounds. A few hours of waiting and nothing. With no way out, Gwen set off from the clearing, which had become a prison without walls in recent days. She walked for a long time, for several hours, until something red flashed in her peripheral vision. The girl ran towards the unknown figure and found herself in a meadow with a rock in the center, like a pedestal. "It's you. The one in the bar." A red-haired abyss hound appeared on the cliff. With a powerful high jump, he jumped off his throne and was a meter away from the girl. The blow was so strong that the ground shook a little, hinting at the massiveness of the monster. Gwen woke up and saw that there was no giant hound carcass nearby. She was madly hungry and thirsty. There were no problems with the first one. She went down from the cliff and satisfied her hunger in the usual way, but there were nuances with the water. It seemed to her that the only water source was several kilometers away. She began to think about what to do. It was unlikely that the owner would let her go. She leaned against the rock, when suddenly she heard a gurgling sound. She walked around the stone and saw that the dog had returned. When the owner finished his business, he lay down on his stone-thrown rock. Welk had not rented Gwen for his abyss hounds for fun. Males were a mass phenomenon for this species, but there were not enough females. "The owners, more. The owners," the wild girl whispered. A heavy sigh rang out in the clearing, and the girl woke up. The girl ate and went to the hole, into which she collapsed from fatigue. A big clawed paw immediately fished it out. The blind muzzle sniffed. "This dog has done his job again."